just takes a moment to prepare the live stream.
Martin, would you like some snow? It's a blizzard where I am right now.
You're kidding.
All right, you can begin.
No, I'm dead serious.
Okay. Well, maybe we better get started if we're going to run into a quorum problem later. I'd like to call the meeting to order and then remind you that we are recording and live streaming the meeting, and it'll be posted on the GRCA site following the meeting. So Ilona, could you do the roll call, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Cassandra Banting. She's there, present.
Here, yep.
Yep.
Thanks.
Brad Carberry. Alan Dale.
Present.
Linda Dixon.
Present.
Andrew Henry.
Present.
Eric Hodgins.
Present.
Ken Hunsberger. Kathy Jameson.
Present.
Eric Hodgins for Jim, Eric Hodgins is proxy for Jim Kirchin. And Ralph Kruger.
Here.
Ian McDonald. Tom Nevels.
Here.
Lloyd Perrin.
I hear.
Peter Ryder.
Here.
Bill Unger, proxy for George Schneider.
Here?
John Sapoulis.
Here.
Bill Strauss.
Here.
Ryan Taylor.
Here.
Bill Unger.
Here still, I
Yes.
think.
Yeah, good. Brian Whitwell. And then we have Ryan Taylor, proxy for Phil Wilson. So quorum has been met.
Thanks very much, Ilona. I have a couple of brief comments today. There has been a new interim acting director appointed for the Source Protection Program. And some of you may remember that Susan Eccleston was with the program probably 2019, early 2020. So she'll be very familiar with the program. So that's good. And Kelly Katona has taken a position with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Since our last meeting, I was involved in a chairs teleconference. We meet approximately quarterly. And this time, rather than having the province update the chairs on the program, what each of the regions did was to provide a summary of what we've been doing in terms of achieving the goals for source protection, and also highlight some of the things that we're still working on, and areas where we think the program could perhaps grow in the future. And we had been having some not differences of opinion, but more priorities. And with COVID, it became, we kept up very well with the technical updates for the chairs, but some of the informal contact and information sharing that was really a big part of our chairs meetings had been missing. And so the province has now made a commitment that they will have more direct communication with the chairs at least once over the years. So I think there was a really good feeling coming out of the meeting that we've overcome some of the hurdles that are experienced with Zoom meetings and not having that good face-to-face contact. And I think all of us are hoping that that can reoccur as soon as possible. I also attended virtually, the GRCA annual meeting, and there were a couple of programs of the Conservation Authority that were highlighted there. And I thought one of them might be interesting to some committee members, was the wastewater optimization program that had been in place to improve river quality. And that is being done through plant optimization and sewage treatment plant upgrades. But since 2012, they've managed to reduce the phosphorus levels in the river by 25% and the ammonia levels discharging into the river by 85%. So there's some significant benefits. And I remember early on that was a major concern of Brantford. So I think that there's been some good progress made there. And the other one was the Rural Water Quality Program. And I had kind of lost track of that, but that's where there are still grants available to assist farmers to improve water quality through things such as manure storage, fuel storage, cover crops. There's quite a broad array of things, and that program is still addressing some of the, assisting people to address some of the upgrades to protect water quality. So that was a pleasant surprise. And I've been working at also chairing some of the Guelph Aramosa project team meetings to develop the consensus on the policies. And I think the report on the agenda today shows that we've managed to build a very good consensus around these policies. And there's a few still to go, some of the tough ones, the permit to take water and the aggregate, but they're working toward consensus on that. So I think it's been a really positive step forward in the last couple of months. So those are my my comments. Is there any questions, or seeing none? Next item on the agenda is to review the agenda. And there's a couple of updates that Martin and I had talked about. What we were thinking of doing was moving report number 10E relating to the presentation to immediately follow the presentation. And then another one is we talked about this in case we lose quorum. I don't know if that's still going to be a problem now, but to move up the annual reports, and perhaps they could go immediately following the source program update 10A, and put them in there. And then there's a third change in a recommendation, and that is, oh, Martin, which one is it?
Are you talking about the change in the resolution that we discussed?
Yeah, in the title.
The aggregate report, which is
yes,
report
I got
10F.
F. The title of the report is slightly different in the resolution than in the agenda, so we should just adopt the report from the resolution from the report. So the words "a chronology of events 2010 to 2021" would just get removed from that resolution. And Martin, did you want to add under other business some information on the press releases from the province on Ontario strengthens the water resource program, and talk about those there?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I can make a brief remarks about that under other business.
So sorry for all those changes. Are there any other changes anybody wants to make? Otherwise, could I have a mover and seconder for, thank you,
Bill
Cassandra.
Strauss. Bill
Bill
Strauss will
Strauss.
move the recommendation.
Yeah, Cassandra had her hand up to move it. So Bill, you can be the seconder.
Thank you, Wendy.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Aye.
Approved unanimously. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Minutes of the previous meeting.
I'll move them.
Thank you,
Wendy.
Linda. Seconder. Lloyd Perrin. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to presentations. We have with us Tiffany Svensson from the municipality of Bayham in the town of Grand Valley, and she's the risk management official there. Tiffany, do you want to go ahead and with your presentation, please?
Sure. I know you've got an ambitious agenda, so I'll try and get right to it. This is a repeat presentation that was made to the Risk Management Official Forum, and I just thought on this first day of April, I could also provide and was asked to provide some good news in terms of the positive effects of implementation to date in the municipality of Bayham. Now, I am going to share my screen and I'm going to try and talk and chew gum at the same time here. All right. So, my name's Tiffany Svensson, and I just thought I'd give you, maybe all of you are very familiar with the whole entire source protection region, but I wanted to sort of provide you with sort of a general location. It is south, Richmond Wellfield is a small wellfield southwest of Tillsonburg, just east of St. Thomas on the north shore of Lake Erie. And the, just make sure I come down here to do this. There we go. The setting, the land use for this particular wellfield is primarily rural with agricultural land use and septic systems, which has resulted in a sort of moderate to high background nitrate concentration or total nitrogen concentration in the regional groundwater setting. This, as you can see, this particular wellhead protection area is a long snake-like feature that sort of runs sort of northeast. And I've captured a little screen capture here of the local provincial water quality monitoring network, the closest one. And you can see here that generally there's a sort of a 3 to 5 milligram, or I guess maybe 3 to 4 milligrams per liter nitrate, just ambient in the environment. This of course assumes that that creek is groundwater fed, and so it reflects some of that water quality in the creek. Zooming in a little bit here, this is the ICA, or the issues contributing area for the Richmond Wells in the municipality of Bayham. And again, I just want to point out here that the area of interest in terms of the issue is entirely agricultural on the west side. And there's a small portion here on the northeast side that has septic systems. And I'll speak a little more about that in just a minute. Zooming in a little further, this is basically the issues contributing area. And I'll be focusing in on sort of the activities of what's been happening in this area since the source protection efforts got started in 2015. So a little description, and I'd like to just preface some of this technical portion of the talk with the fact that this is a very, very simple, relatively speaking, simple setting from a hydrogeological context point of view. And just so that you can kind of do a bit of compare and contrast, I got input from the RMO at the region of Waterloo, Eric Thuss, to sort of compare and contrast it with sort of a similar setting, but just to demonstrate how different they can be in the region of Waterloo, so that it's not oversimplifying the issue, I guess, is what I want to why I want to compare these two settings. So in Bayham, at the Richmond well field, we have two adjacent wells. They're similar in depth. They're completed in a shallow, confined, overburden aquifer. They're slightly different in nitrate concentrations. I've just graphically, and I'm assuming you will get copies of this presentation, so you can go back and take a look, but just not to scale, but graphically presented here, you've got like a clay confining layer and a slightly thicker clay confining layer at the OW3 well. And these are pretty close to each other. I mean, they're within 4 or 5 meters of each other. And you can see the placement of the pump intake and the placement of the screen here. OW3 is, which is this well, is about 1/2 meter deeper than OW2. The screen length in both wells is the same. And the overlying aquitard is about 1/2 meter thicker here in OW3 than it is in OW2. The static water level in both cases is just above the screen, and the pump intake, as I mentioned, is just below the screen. So I mention these things because some of these factors may relate to how nitrate is captured, and I'll get into that a little bit more shortly. So both wells were constructed in 2012. And the local municipality is treating the source water for nitrate before distribution. The total volume being taken is less than 50,000 liters per day, which is a threshold that means they do not need a permit to take water for this system. So it's a very small system, all things considered. And in general, although they're not required to report the taking, I've been advised that from operations that both wells typically alternate pumping, but sometimes they pump at the same time and they pump at the same rate. But in general, they alternate when they're pumping. And that total taking goes up slightly in the summer for probably obvious reasons. So as mentioned, I'd like to just compare and contrast this with a region of Waterloo setting where they also have a nitrate issues contributing area delineated. And if you take a look here, I can explain that it's a much, much larger ICA. So way more properties that we're talking about. It's a much more complex hydrogeological setting. And the well depths are about 36.2 6 meters deep, so twice as deep as the Richmond wells. The confining, slightly leaky aquitard is a clay with sand and gravel, which is about 22 meters thick, which is 7 times thicker than the setting at Richmond. The gravel and sand aquifer is a much thicker aquifer. It's a 14.4 meters thick, which is a 3 to 4 times thicker aquifer. So as I'm describing this, I hope you can appreciate that the Waterloo setting is just a much bigger setting. And so the expectation around seeing a response to efforts in a setting like this would not be, you would not expect to see it as quickly as perhaps we're seeing down in Richmond. So that's the main point I want to make on this. So the pump depth here is 27.4 meters below ground surface, which is placed in the screen versus below the screen. And the recommended pumping rate is 150 gallons per minute, or 3,975 liters per minute, which is a pumping rate of 100 times greater than what Richmond's pumping rate is. Also just pointing out that there's a lower concentration of nitrate in these wells, and that the region is not treating nitrate at the source. So different, but the same. So the same in the fact that you've got an ICA for nitrate, and the same in the fact that you've got 2 wells side by side, but all the other points being very different. So that's just to sort of make the point that what we are seeing in terms of a positive impact of the source protection efforts may be a while before you might see similar kind of trends in the region of Waterloo setting, or a setting similar to that. So there's been a number of things that have happened since 2015. I wanted to just point out some of the some of the activities and then some of the challenges. So we've been working with a very cooperative landowner, property owner, who was very readily willing to voluntarily engage in the prohibition of no agricultural source materials applied within the WAPA-A, no commercial fertilizer application in WAPA-A, and no pesticide application in WAPA-A. So they understood the importance and the value of this effort, and voluntarily engaged in that those prohibitionary measures. Then we had, as this committee would know, there was an update to the ICA, or the area, which then included WAPA-B. And I'm not sure if you can see my cursor here, but it went from just the WAPA-A to including, instead of just the one property owner, 2 additional property owners, where the policy of no commercial fertilizer application was applied as an additional sort of policy update. At that point, there was an open house down in near the well field in the Richmond area, and it was well attended. And at that time, we confirmed with the property owners that they were willing to go along with, cooperate with these additional measures. So again, appreciative of the commitment to the effort. We also at that time were made aware of the fact that there had been a generational change on the farm, and that the next generation had taken over management of the farm. And that included the person who was responsible for nutrient management of the farm property. And this farm was phased in early on in the under the Nutrient Management Act and regulations. So they were well versed and well managed sort of operations in terms of nutrient management. So again, requesting these sorts of things and discussing these things with them has been, the fact that we can use the same language has helped a lot. And then, as you're probably also aware, the prescribed instrument amendment came into effect. So we're able to sort of work with that idea of the prescribed instrument under the Nutrient Management Act can form part of our source protection efforts. So that's been a good sort of next step as well. And then most recently, we have completed the septic system inspections. There was uncertainty around how many septic systems there were because of how the WAPA A fell. So if the septic beds were in the backyard of some of the properties, we weren't sure if there would be 3 or possibly 4 septic systems, but we have been able to confirm that there were indeed 2 septic systems that fell within the WAPA A. So, and they have now been inspected and confirmed to be operating properly. The key challenges that we, and I've checked with my fellow RMOs in other jurisdictions when it comes to dealing with agricultural operations, is we want to respect and maintain the windows of time when we're engaging with farmers, that it's outside of the super crazy active period of operation. So that's definitely sort of slowed and staggered efforts out over the course of different years. There's been changes, as I mentioned, to the ICA and the source protection policy. So they added communication challenges around that, starting with the WAPA A and then going back out to say, well, actually, we've got some more land. And then the challenges around actually reaching the persons engaged in the activity and the owners of the property. That's in this particular part of the world, Ontario, that's been, we've had to rely on snail mail basically to reach those property owners, and I have no way except that way to reach them until I get their phone number. And I have not been able to get that information from these most recently added landowners. We have delivered letters and so on, but just not heard back. And also the other, from the farmer's perspective, there's only a portion of the land that actually is impacted by because of the shape of the WAPA. So when we're talking to these landowners, what we have heard on a couple of occasions is that they sort of feel like they need to write off the southern half of their property because it's too complicated to stop their planting or their cultivation practices just for a strip in the middle of their farm, basic, or land. So that is a challenge, and we're still considering how to best manage that. So another really helpful effort that was done early on was actually a nitrate source study, which I think helped to inform the policies that are in the source protection plan. So it was a nitrate isotope analysis done by Dr. John Spolstra of Environment Canada, an adjunct professor at University of Waterloo. And the results, they analyzed for 4 different artificial sweeteners, and the presence absence of those sweeteners would tell us or inform us whether there was septic system nitrate influence in this well or not. And or also potentially inform us to some extent of what the source of nitrate might be if it wasn't that. So the results showed that there was no artificial sweeteners detected in the source water. So therefore, those 2 septic systems just inside the WAPA A are not likely the source of the nitrate, unless the residents of that property had never had any sugar-free diet, soft drink, or other kinds of dietary products that would have those artificial sweeteners in it. Also, the isotope signature is very consistent with data from other sites where fertilizers are the known source of groundwater nitrate. So therefore, all of that sort of supports and feeds into the policy of not applying any synthetic fertilizer within that entire ICA, which now extends out to include WAPA B. So there. Now on to the actual results and the good news piece, which is, as you can see here, the trend in both wells is generally downward, with the shallower well, the slightly shallower well, OW2, being a slightly steeper decrease. Now, a couple of points to make here. There's a lot of information on this slide. One is that should be sort of a technical piece to mention, is nitrate is typically vertically stratified, which means that you have higher concentrations, generally speaking. We don't know that for sure here, but generally speaking, you have higher concentrations at shallower depths, and then it diminishes with depth depending on denitrification potentials in the aquifer that you're drawing on. So the OW2 well, being the shallower well, it's not surprising then that it generally has higher concentrations. But the slightly deeper well historically had much greater fluctuations, as you see here. And while it's impossible to verify completely, it's probably related to pumping rates and climatic differences and input differences. There's sort of a buffer time or legacy nitrate inputs that might be reflected here, seasonal input differences and seasonal weather differences, and then seasonal pumping rate differences. All of those things combined could perhaps be a result of or result in these kinds of larger fluctuations. But as you see, as of about September 17, certainly in OW3, the orange line here, those fluctuations have to some extent diminished. And that's the deeper of the two wells. You still see a little bit of fluctuation here in the shallower well, but again, they may be related to seasonal differences and pumping rate differences. So we would need to continue monitoring to see if these trends continue in the right direction. And once the additional measures of no commercial fertilizers are applied within the WAPA B, perhaps that is indeed what we will see. So that's what we're working towards, is to implement the no fertilizer policy in WAPA B. So just wrapping up here. So I know you're tight on time here. So key observations, I just want to just say the last slide here is the good science has really helped to understand the source of the issue, and it allowed us to focus on activities that more likely address the issue. So the science really does help, the assessment report information, and then further efforts along those lines. It helped us to start with the activities that directly address the issue in the priority area WAPA A. One huge thing has definitely been the engagement and cooperative landowners. It's a very significant reason why we are where we are. And that's in spite of the challenges around implementing source protection policies. Voluntary action can go a long way, in my opinion. And you just have to keep working at managing nitrogen input, because I think this data in this very simple setting is demonstrating that it does make a difference eventually. And that we'll see where the next 5 years will take us with respect to implementing the prohibition of synthetic fertilizer in WAPA B. And I just want to acknowledge a number of individuals here that really have contributed to where we are today. Ed Rolston, at the manager of capital projects at Municipality of Bayham, has been hugely helpful in this. He actually, before I came on as RMO, he was the one who went out and engaged with the landowner, even before 2015. John Spolster's work, of course. The updated Source Protection Information Atlas is a huge, wonderful resource to rely upon, I think, for anybody, including the general public. And Long Point Region Conservation Authority, the Source Protection Authority staff, implementation working group folks that I've been working with, and Eric Thuss at the region of Waterloo. I just wanted to thank him as well for all their contributions. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Great. Thanks very much, Tiffany. Are there any questions for Tiffany? Alan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment first, then a question, if I may. I remember when the committee first dealt with this issue, and it seemed like there was some reluctance at the time. The municipality wasn't sure about protection. They were treating the nitrate problem, and there was, I guess, a thought that they could just continue treating it. And I'm glad that this committee said, no, we are interested in the first step, the first barrier, which is protection. We are a protection committee. And we went ahead and got involved in this one. And it's glad to see some results here. And I know in the county of Oxford, we've done things like this, and the county had a well field, and they took some land out of production. They put into a grass strip. If you plant some type of a cover crop, that might help the farmer sort of visualize where the restricted area is and not cultivate that area, not apply fertilizer there. And if you put something like native prairie grass in, it's got real deep roots and it can utilize some excess nitrogen in the soil. And it takes a few years, as Tiffany was mentioning, to use that nitrogen before it goes down through the soil and ends up in your water. But in this case, it sounds like we have at least one real cooperative landowner, and hopefully the other ones will come on board as well. So my big question is, has this information been shared with this landowner? And I'd like to think that we're working with this person and, you know, update them and thank them and let them know that all of these efforts are paying off. I think a lot of landowners are afraid of the committee and RMOs and what municipalities are trying to do here. And if they know that there's been results and that what they're doing is making a difference, I think that's a really good information to share with them and really helps. So I'm hopeful. That's my question. I'm hopeful that this farmer is aware of this and that we're continuing to work with them.
Yeah, I can absolutely tell you that being able to show them this graph was a huge help in our conversation, in our discussion around what needs to happen formally in terms of paperwork and continue to happen in terms of what they are / not doing. And it was very, I think, encouraging to them to know that the effort that they're making is actually already showing, reflecting the efforts they're making. And Alan, I really like the idea of planting some kind of prairie grass just to delineate, because right now they have like some stakes that they use to kind of visually understand where the well is and sort of where it goes. But I think the further away you get from the well, it's harder to sort of mark that out. So I'll bring that back to them as a suggestion. But yes, having this data absolutely has been helpful and has been shared.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair, this is Bill Unger.
Yes.
Just to make a comment to Tiffany, have the landowner, who I know personally, contact Alice, Elgin County. They might be able to get some funding to put that into prairie grass.
Okay. Elgin County?
Alice, Elgin County, running out of the LRPCA.
Okay, I will.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much, Tiffany. We're going to bring forward then the report, number 5. Can I have a mover and seconder for the report?
I'll move. Andrew.
Seconded by Bill Unger.
Thank you, Andrew and Bill. All those in, are there any questions about the report? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. It's 1:45 now. I'm wondering, I'm looking for some guidance, Martin and Ilona. How long is the SharePoint presentation?
The SharePoint presentation, I can just go over it in 2 minutes if you like, just to quickly go through some of the pages.
Okay, that'd be lovely.
Okay, I'll do that now. Just give me one moment and I will share my screen. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see this. This is our new Lake Erie Region SharePoint site. We had one previously for the last couple of years, and it was used by implementing members of the Lake Erie Region Source Protection Plan. So it was mostly municipalities and RMOs, and then staff like ourselves or other staff from other regions. We've actually updated it throughout the fall and into the early winter, and this is our new SharePoint site. And some of you probably remember, it was actually a couple months ago, we did add Source Protection Committee members to the SharePoint site, so you should have access now. If you don't have the email or remember where the email is, please let me know and I can resend it, but you should have access to get to this site. So this site here, this is our landing page. The whole purpose of it is to sort of be a forum for sharing information for everything related to source protection. And the idea is that when we have implementing bodies, they can go here for examples, they can go here for links or guidance on different processes. So this is our landing page, and we've created this page along with a lot of other pages on the left-hand side here to help move you throughout the site. So that's really the difference between this SharePoint site and our old one. When you click on different components here, you can click on something, it'll actually directly take you to a particular website or to a particular folder, and it'll keep shifting you around the site. So I think this, of course, is not, loading, but it does load you to a website page normally. I know, this is good timing. I'm not going to click on that one. For example, Part 4 implementation resources. There we go. Okay, this one takes you to a folder in our documents library. So you can either click on the documents library, or you can go to some of these icons that we have throughout the pages. So I just wanted to show you here, we have lots of different things you can click on. I won't go through everything, but I do encourage you to explore and take a look. One of the important things that you may be interested in is now, in addition to going to the GRCA's YouTube site, if you want to see the Source Protection Committee meetings, we do have them posted here. So we have all the virtual meetings we've had thus far up to January 21st. I'll post this one next week once it happens. We have quick links, contacts, news and events. We have other pages like Source Protection Plan updates. Again, a lot of this is for implementing bodies and municipalities to help them through the process and all the information that they'll need and all the information we will need. Another one that may interest you is the pages Acts and Regulations. We again have quick links to the Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, Ontario Water Resources Act, our general 28707. This is the source protection. This is where all the regulations are. Here's the SPC committee regulation and the director's technical rules. So I just wanted to keep it brief. If you haven't had a chance to explore, I do encourage you to take a look at the site. And again, if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Ilona. I've motored around this site a little bit, and it's really user-friendly and lots of information there that's right at your fingertips. So I'd encourage everybody to try it out. It's really very good. Moving on then, we have one piece of correspondence. And I do need a motion to receive the correspondence for information. Ralph and Ryan, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Martin, would you like to do your highlights for the program update report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I can do that. So moving on to report number 1, just a couple of highlights. I would like to quickly, just in reference to the correspondence that you just received, just to note that this is a reflection of that many of the source protection plans across the province have timelines associated with the implementation of risk management or the negotiation of risk management plans. And the correspondence from Halton Region is with respect to those deadlines in other source protection plans. We don't in Lake Erie Region. We don't have those deadlines or timelines associated with risk management plans, so that correspondence is not applicable to our source protection plans. I did want to also just quickly mention that I know we promised a report for the committee with respect to non-municipal drinking water systems and how they can be protected. I've been in touch with Olga from the ministry. We're still waiting for the release of guidance documents from the ministry. We'd like to kind of pull that together in terms of bringing something forward once we have received a guidance. So hopefully we can bring something back to the committee in June. And then just to provide an update on the process for the most recent Section 34 update to the Grand River Source Protection Plan. This is with regard to the Wellington Waterloo update. You will be familiar with in January, we brought this forward and we went to public consultation, which closed on March the 8th. We've received quite a number of comments, 100 plus in total. Some of them are fairly technical, fairly lengthy, and we do need to have some additional time to respond to them accurately and sufficiently. It's also maybe a reflection of that we are in this COVID environment. We have not had any face-to-face discussions. We had Zoom meetings like this and webinars to kind of interact with the public, with the stakeholders. So obviously not quite the ideal. So hence the decision to postpone the bringing back those comments with responses to the June meeting. Hence, you're not seeing that on the agenda today. And that is really my update. You will have a more detailed table with an outlook of what's coming our way with regards to separate updates in the report. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Martin. Are there any questions or comments for Martin? Can I have a mover and seconder for the report?
Alan, I'll move that.
Thank you, Alan.
I'll second it, Wendy.
Thank you, Linda. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. I think then what we agreed to do was to turn our attention now to the annual progress reports and do those next. So we're sure to get those completed so that they can get submitted to the ministry by May the 1st. So Ilona, are you making comments on these reports?
Yes, thank you,
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair. So I'll begin with the Catfish Creek Annual Progress Report. I won't go through the whole report and attachments at this time, but I'd just like to highlight our recommended response and rationale for the extent to which the objectives in the plan have been achieved in the 2020 annual reporting period. But before I start, I do want to make mention of an error in the supplemental form, which is at the top of page 97 of your agenda package. It was the final threats calculation. It reads 0%. That should be 36%. I've since corrected it in the version that I have. So this was a software error, and of course, I'll make sure it is corrected in the annual reports and in the Source Protection Authority letter and information that is sent to Catfish Creek before it's submitted to the ministry. So our general recommendation, though, is that the Catfish Creek, for Catfish Creek, the objectives are progressing well and are on target. And because there was also that error in the percentage, I have tweaked the rationale for progressing well and on target. It will read that 19 existing significant drinking water threats were identified in the plan when it first took effect. And since then, 36% of the threats have been addressed, not 100%. And the progress made would be 100%. However, because of COVID-19 restrictions, there were delays for inspections of some on-site sewage systems. However, all the systems are scheduled to be inspected in the next cycle. And then additionally, all of the legally binding plan policies that address significant drinking water threats are implemented or in progress. And that is the end of the Catfish Creek report.
Great, thank you, Ilona. Any questions or comments for Ilona? I'm not seeing any. If I miss anybody, please speak up. Can I have a mover and seconder for this report?
Bill Strauss, move or second.
Thank you, Bill. Mover. And seconder? Eric
Andrew
Hodgins.
Henry, I'll second.
Oh, Andrew, okay, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried unanimously, thank you. So the next one is the Kettle Creek annual report. Ilona?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So similarly for Kettle Creek and Long Point region in the Grand River, I'm not going to be going through the whole report and the attachments at this time, but again, I'll just highlight the recommended response and the rationale for the extent to which the objectives in the plan have been achieved during the 2020 annual reporting period. So our recommendation is that the objectives are progressing well and are on target. There were only 2 significant drinking water threats that were actually identified at the time that the plan took effect. And since that time, one no longer exists and the other one has been addressed. Also, all of the legally binding plan policies that address significant drinking water threats are either implemented, in progress, or they're implemented because policy outcomes have been evaluated and no further action is required. So that's a relatively quick one, and that's the end of the report for Kettle Creek.
Thank you. Any questions for Ilona? Seeing none, can I have a mover and seconder?
Moved by
Ralph
Bill
Kruger.
Unger.
Bill Unger? Yeah, I got, oh, did you have a question, Ralph?
I think he was trying to second it. Seconding.
Okay, I have you as the mover, Ralph, and Bill Unger as the seconder.
Okay.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried unanimously, thank you. Next one is the Long Point Annual Progress Report.
Thank you. And before I start, I also want to point out for Long Point region, the same software error that led to the 0% for enumerated threats progress for Catfish Creek also occurred for Long Point region on page 171 of the agenda package. So the final threats calculation, it reads in the package 0%. Again, it's not 0%. This should be 68%. I will correct that in the information that goes to the Source Protection Authority, and it will be corrected before it's submitted to the ministry. I also want to make note that for Long Point region and actually for the Grand River, Haldimand County did not complete their 2020 annual reporting requirements due to municipal staffing changes. So the figures presented in the Long Point Region supplemental form and annual progress report do not include any data from Haldimand County, and we will be following up with them once annual reporting is wrapped up. So for Long Point Region, our recommendation is that the objectives are progressing well and are on target. I always seem to have an issue saying that. The percentage of overall progress made in 2020 in addressing significant threats was 68%. So this is an improvement over 2019, which was 61%. Although there was an improvement, the slight increase was reflective of limited implementation as a result of COVID-19 restrictions. But on a positive note, all the legally binding plan policies that address significant drinking water threats, they are implemented, or they're in progress, or implemented because policy outcomes were evaluated and no further action was required. And that is the report for Long Point Region.
Thanks, Ilona. Any questions for Ilona? Can I have a mover and seconder? Ryan and John Sapoulis seconding. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And now the final one, the Grand River.
Yes.
Progress report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, the final report is for the Grand River. And again, as I mentioned, I'd just like to point out the threats calculation error also occurred for Grand River. It's on the top of page 213 of your agenda package. Again, it reads 0%. It should read 27%. I will correct that for the Source Protection Authority letter and before we submit to the ministry. And again, Haldimand County, because part of Haldimand County is in the Grand River, they also report for the portion of their county that's in the Grand River SPA. So they did not complete their 2020 annual reporting requirements, and we will be following up with them individually afterwards. The recommendation, as the other three, is the same, that the Grand River objectives are progressing well and are on target. The percentage of overall progress made in 2020 in addressing significant drinking water threats was 27%. So this is a slight improvement from 2019's 21%. And again, similar to Long Point Region, the percentage is a reflection of COVID-19 pandemic restrictions, causing some challenges for implementation. And also, I think is reflective of progress for municipalities that have a large number of significant threats. So for these municipalities, implementation is often phased over many years, and they have a very large number of properties and limited staff resources. So some of these larger municipalities have opted to prioritize certain properties and activities that have the highest potential for impact. And then lastly, all the legally binding plan policies that address significant drinking water threats, they are implemented or they're in progress or implemented because policy outcomes were evaluated and no further actions were required. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ilona. Good news all around. Any questions for Ilona? John?
Yes, the report has identifies roughly 2,000 incidences which were cleared. In other words, were part of the initial concern, and they were cleared through site observations. Unfortunately, the calculation doesn't recognize these. So I was wondering if we can put in the letter, covering letter, going to the province, suggesting that there's over 2,000 or whatever the number is. I think it's 2080 incidences that were categorized as C that are not included in the calculation because of the mathematical formula suggested by the province.
Okay, thank you, John. I'll just make note of that, and we'll revisit the calculation as well. C should be captured in the calculation. So again, it could be the output, the percentage that's just incorrect, and we can revisit that to make sure it is correct. before we submit it.
I can
unless Martin
jump
wants to
in
add
as
to
well,
it.
maybe,
Sure.
John and Alona, to just. I think you're right. It is part of the calculation, but the way the way in which it's been calculated, I think from what I understand, John, the comment really is that it's not recognizing the effort that is kind of needed to really address, do those site visits and actually make those numbers, make those threats go away, so to speak, that they're being addressed. So certainly we can include language into the letter, into the submission, that we can't really change the calculation per se, because it's a provincial calculation, but we can make a comment and put some language around to note that the effort that municipalities have done over not just this past year, but obviously before as well, that's also part of implementation of the source protection plan.
Does that help, John?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Good. When I was looking at those tables, I had a hard time figuring out what A, B, and C were. But I did get an answer, and and there was a comment about how it was calculated, but I think Martin's hit the nail on the head with saying that it's really the effort that's not recognized in trying to clear that.
Yes, agreed. So yeah, as Martin said, we'll make sure to recognize the effort, especially particularly C, in removing some of those threats. And moving forward also for next year, so it's easier to understand what A, B, C, D is, I think we'll sort of beef up the question. I guess the way you could say it, so that you understand as the reader, as the Source Protection Committee, what those numbers actually represent. So we can change that for the 2021 annual reporting year. We do have some flexibility. Obviously, we have to ask a question a certain way, but we can tweak it a bit so that it's more understandable for the reader and for the implementing body filling it out.
Well, that'd be great. Thank you. Can I have mover and seconder? Peter Ryder and Eric Hodgins. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Tom, did I see your hand up as opposed? No, you're in favor? Okay, thank you. Just to confirm, Tom was in favor too. So it's carried unanimously.
I apologize, Wendy. I seem to be freezing up here just about all the time.
Maybe that's what it was. It came up after, and I was worried that it needed to be correctly recorded.
Yeah, my apology.
No problem. Thanks very much. So we've got all the really time-sensitive material dealt with. So let's go back in the agenda to the second report. And that is the Grand River Assessment Report and Protection Plan for the town of Grand Valley. And Emily, I understand you're the presenter on this one?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, so we have a update to the Grand River Source Protection Plan and Assessment Report. It's another Section 34. And the reason for the Section 34 is that Grand Valley has a new well that they would like to put online. So the changes will be in the Dufferin County section, and within that chapter is the Grand Valley information. So Grand Valley currently has 3 wells that they're pumping from. They're all bedrock wells. Oh, thank you, Martin. Yes, Martin's actually going to share his screen and show the new wellhead protection areas. So thank you, Martin. Yes, so you can see on the map that he shared, there's PW 1 and 2 and PW 3. Those are the existing wells. And those wellhead protection areas were delineated in 2010. And then the new well, PW5 there, was delineated more recently in early 2021. And and, you know, obviously the reasoning for delineating the new wellhead protection area and going through all of the source water protection technical work is it is a requirement to have an approved plan and AR in order for them to provide water to the public. So I guess just giving a little bit of background, I know we're a little bit tight on time, so I don't want to talk too long about everything. So essentially the vulnerability assessments were done, managed land, livestock density, impervious surfaces, and a threats assessment was done. All of the information for PW 1, 2, and 3 hasn't been changed. That has all stayed the same. And there has been threats enumerated for PW 5. All the threats enumerated, significant drinking water threats, were enumerated in the WAP A. There are 4 new threats and they're on 2 properties. Along with the updates to the assessment report, there's also updates to the plan that, you know, go along with the amendments to the assessment reports. They're pretty minor in the plan. There's no changes to the policies. The current policies will apply to the new wellhead protection area for PW 5. And obviously the policy applicability map has been updated, and that's in the plan, and it's also in the report as well. Oh, thanks, Martin.
Yeah, there it is.
So for next steps, so we are hoping to, as you can see in the recommendation, for the committee to release the updated Grand River AR and plan for pre-consultation. We're hoping to begin pre-consultation on April 6th, and it would end on May 11th. As usual, pre-consultation comments received, you know, we would address the comments and include it and bring it back to the committee at the next meeting, which is the June 17th meeting. And then after that, we would hope to be able to release for public consultation, which would happen in the summer. And then after public consultation, we would hope to submit the revised, updated Grand River AR and plan to the ministry in the fall. Yes, and that is everything that I have to say. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Emily. Any questions for Emily? Seeing none, can I have a mover and seconder?
Alan, I'll move that.
Thank you, Alan. Ryan seconding. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to the Guelph Hermosa progress report. Martin, are you speaking to this one?
I am, Madam Chair. Thank you. Yes, and just to kind of add to what Wendy was commenting on in her chair's remarks, I think it's fair to say we've made some significant progress. A first set of policies was shared with the committee in January. This is an update. We have a few policies that we still need to work through at the project team level. They will be coming forward in June. But we are fairly close to having a complete consensus policy set. Those are, as Wendy was mentioning, they do not yet include the prescribed instrument policies with regards to permit to take water and the aggregate resource approval. Those discussions are still occurring separately, and actually just this week we've received an invite. So the next meeting between the City of Guelph and the Ministry is going to be scheduled. I think it's April 23 from my memory. So in April we'll meet again to kind of have further discussions, the city and the province. Obviously, those discussions will be brought back to the project team at some point, and then we're going to bring project team recommendations to the committee once those discussions have wrapped up. So in the report, you have a table with updated policies on that consensus kind of package, and the the kind of the big change or the big step forward from what you received in January to now. There've been a few tweaks on some of the existing policies. We're still working on some of those. There's certainly some language changes. We're looking at defined terms and consistency in some of the language, but in terms of the actual the content, a majority of the new policies are with regards to planning act policies or policies that are addressing the kind of planning, growth and development related kind of issues and context on how we can address the water taking and the recharge in relation to what's happening on the ground. Obviously, a lot of the growth and development has an impact on either the water that is being taken with regards to the bigger demands, but also in terms of some of the supply, in terms of recharge that may be changing. So a lot of those aspects have now been looked at, and we've kind of come to a conclusion in terms of how some of those aspects should be addressed. So those are the policies that we've identified with a yellow highlight. Most of those are kind of planning, growth, and growth and development kind of related. There's a couple of other ones in terms of managing municipal water services, private water takings, maybe using bylaws and so forth. There's a few other ones that you've been seeing that we've included as well, that we have now a kind of complete set for all the 4 municipal chapters in going forward. As I mentioned in the report, they are still subject to change as we go on through with further discussions, and specifically when some of the discussions of the prescribed instrument policies come back. We may need to tweak those other ones again. There may be interrelated changes and so forth. So there's certainly still draft, but I'm comfortable to say that we've really made some significant progress. There's been good discussions at the project team levels and individually with the municipal partners to move those forward. And so in terms of the next steps, I think I just mentioned, so we bringing back additional policies on the consensus side in June. So likely we'll be able to wrap that up. And then we'll bring back the prescribed instrument policies as soon as those discussions have been brought back to the project team, and we can bring them forward to the committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Any questions or comments for Martin? I don't see any. Can I have a mover and seconder to receive the report for information?
Bill Strauss, move or second.
Thanks, Bill. And John Sapoulis, second. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next report are the comments on the Growing the Greenbelt plan. Martin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, so this is a provincial proposal that was most recently been posted on the Environmental Registry. It is with regards to a proposed expansion of the Greenbelt, and specifically in this area of the province with regards to enhancing and including the Periscalt moraine, and also including urban river valley into the Greenbelt designations. What we've done at the GRCA is we've with many of the staff in engineering and resource management, we've put together a report that was presented at the GRCA board last Friday. I've attached the board report to this report and just provided a very brief summary report for context. So I won't go into the details of all the analysis that has been put forward by the board report, but suffice to say that there's maybe a few major or maybe key messages that we'd like to kind of put forward. Obviously, and I've summarized that in the summary report. there is a very distinct value and function that those moraines and those specific natural heritage features that they provide to the watershed, specifically to the rivers, to the groundwater in terms of the system and how it functions overall. So that is obviously something that is driving the kind of the assessment. There's many other important factors, though, that the province should take into account in terms of how they move forward, and that is really with regards to the existing planning framework, how it works with the existing growth plan, how it works with regards to municipal official plan policies and how they would interact with the Greenbelt policy, as in terms of what can municipal policies that quite often are actually more stringent, could they supersede Greenbelt plan policies? So there's a number of other aspects that need to be considered as well by the province in terms of the recommendations that the board report is making. Other aspects too, in terms of making sure that we or the province is really looking at the full set of scientific data and information that is held locally by municipalities and in this case the GRCA. In terms of making sure that if they do move forward with this proposal, that we have the best available information that will define that area. But then overall, I think the recommendation from that has been put forward by the GRCA to the board is for the province to consider postponing this expansion. And one of the prime reasons also is that currently municipalities are in most cases still in the depth of updating their official plans to actually conform with the recent updates of the growth plan. And it would be premature to really go forward with any enhancement or expansion of the Greenbelt before that process has been concluded, which would then provide a better analysis of actually what the gaps on a policy level would be between what can be achieved through the growth plan and what could be achieved through additional Greenbelt plan expansions. So with that, I think I'll hand it over to Wendy as part of that report.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Any questions or comments for Martin? I'm not seeing any. Can I have a mover and seconder for the report?
I'll move the report, Wendy.
Linda Dixon and Ralph Kruger. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you. It's carried unanimously. And then the next item on the agenda is a report providing information on aggregate extraction and drinking water that related to the unfinished business item. And we felt it would be important to give, especially the new committee members, some kind of background information on how that started and how it's changed over time and why 10 years. Probably reflects a lot of the changes that have been happening in the background. But Martin, I'll let you take people through the report, and if there's any questions, we'll handle them at the end.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, so we really thought it would be a good idea to bring forward a bit of a history on where this issue has come from and the importance that the committee has put on that issue. As you will recall, we had some discussions over the last couple of committee meetings, and it is related to an early request by the committee for the province to address very first in 2010 aggregate extraction, excavation below the water. I'm reading it off because I want to make sure I'm getting the words right. excavation below the water table that breaches the aquitard, protecting a municipal drinking water supply aquifer. So very specific. In March 31st, 2010, a concern brought forward by the province, by the Source Protection Committee to the province. In those days, obviously, it was the early days of the program. That was before any work was done in terms of updating the Aggregate Resources Act and the framework for addressing those things. And it was really an attempt by the committee at that time to bring issues forward that were considered to not being considered in the framework under the Clean Water Act. At the time, that request to actually look at the prescribed activities of what could be included in the source protection plan, that wasn't kind of allowed. But the committee followed up a year later in February 2011 with more specific requests on what we call a local threat request. And those are specifically with regards to the post-extraction phase of those aggregate operations. And specifically two items, the bringing in of fill. If once you have a quarry that would be rehabilitated, or if in other cases where the pumping would stop and it would, the water would be allowed to fill up to a more natural level again, and that would, in many cases, that would result in kind of ponding of water lakes and so forth. So the bringing in of fill, that request was fairly quickly. We got a response the same year in September 2011, I believe, and then. But we're still waiting for, as we mentioned, we're still waiting for a response from the province on the second request. Now, we've had discussions with Olga and with the province over the last couple of committee meetings and in between. So I know and I understand that the committee is that the province is actively working with senior management to bring us a response back. So it's very well on their radar, and I'm sure later on Olga can speak to it as well. But I do like to kind of just provide a little more context of what's happened over the last few years with respect to this item. So we've obviously over the years, a number of times the committee has made requests back to the province in terms of letters to provide for the province to provide us updates. In more recent years, with the province, first with the previous government addressing or starting discussions on changing the aggregate resources framework with the blueprint for change, and then later on with the current government in moving forward with some changes. In most cases, we've as a committee, in addition to many other agencies, including the GRCA, provided comments to the province on moving forward with those changes and how to incorporate source protection into the aggregate resources framework. And those comments really reflect, I think, that the committee feels like those concerns could best be addressed by incorporating them into the provincial framework under the Aggregate Resources Act. And so things obviously changed over the years in terms of from being that local threat request that would be addressed through the Clean Water Act that was proposed in 2011 to what we have now in terms of a changed Aggregate Resources Act. And I think once we receive a response back from the province on that local threat request, I think it behooves us then to go back to relook at the changed landscape in terms of the updated Aggregate Resources Act framework, and then as a committee look at whether that would satisfy the original concern or whether additional measures would need to be looked at from a committee's perspective. So what I'm suggesting is that at a later point, staff would bring forward a report to the committee once we've received a response from the province that would then look at that broader question again for then the committee to discuss and make a decision on any further steps. So that's really all I wanted to say. There's obviously a bit more detail in the report for you to go back to or read, but that's my report to the committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Andrew, you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chair. When this topic first came up many, many years ago and subsequently since, I tried to expand some of the original discussions. So rather than focusing on aggregate operations and breaching the aquitard and a lot of those activities, I tried to expand those discussions to more of a policy level discussion to consider activities or circumstances that would result in changing the vulnerability of a wellhead or an intake, rather than just the specific activities of a theoretical aggregate operation. More recently, I think last year, I had submitted a letter to you, Madam Chair, and to the Source Protection Region on this fact. I know it was included or was supposed to be included in some of the comments being forwarded to the ministry on an ERO comment period. But I'm wondering if these discussions again are being addressed, or is it being considered, or if they're resolved.
Martin?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Certainly, I can first of all confirm that yes, we've when we received your letter, Andrew, we certainly included that in our comments back to the ministry at the time. I would have to follow up specifically with the province on whether they are considering a more broader discussion around those things. I certainly support having a look at, and I think it'd be a broader discussion on how this Clean Water Act framework has been set up. It's as we know currently, the activities that we can address through the Clean Water Act are those that, on the quality side at least, are those that are releasing pathogens and chemicals, and any change in vulnerability we cannot actively or proactively address. We can only reactively kind of, identify a transport pathway where the vulnerability has changed or been taken away. And so certainly that it would be a discussion that should be had at the provincial level to enhance the Clean Water Act with a broader discussion around how changes that affect the vulnerability could be looked at. It's certainly not just aggregate construction. It could also be other development that, for example, underground parking lots that going or deep foundation kind of that are built for buildings. So certainly there's broader discussions possibly that are needed to look at how vulnerability changes can be addressed, because they definitely also affect how a source of municipal water is protected or is not. So I can certainly commit to taking that back to the province as well. I mean, Olga is listening today as well, so she, I'm sure, can bring that back. But I can do that myself as well.
Olga, did you want to make any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Martin, for the context in your report. I just want to offer, sort of echoing what Martin has said, that I've been speaking with my colleagues in the branch who are on this file, and I know that we are in a better position to revisit this and are very actively reviewing the request. I mean, that said, I do appreciate that you've been waiting for a very long time for a response, and that it's been a frustrating process. And I just want to take a moment to assure you that the branch is very aware of your concerns. And from my internal discussions, I understand that it is a priority file for us, and that we are hoping to provide a final response to you in the coming months. And I think the challenge in part, and I think this touches on a little bit of what Martin and Andrew maybe were speaking to, is this concept that the post-closure pit with a connection to the municipal aquifer would function as a transport pathway, not unlike other natural water bodies. So the Clean Water Act does provide some ways to address that type of risk, which includes, delineating a special vulnerable area, which would be the WAPA-E, but also potentially increasing the vulnerability score in that area due to the presence of the transport pathway. So I think there are several concepts that our staff are currently discussing, and part of that conversation is how to reconcile how you would assign a hazard rating to the pond, given that it functions as a transport pathway more so than other land-based activities under our framework, that are activities that are introducing a pathogen or a contaminant, a chemical to the water source. So, I mean, that's just sort of at a high level. I wanted to give you a bit of a sense of how some of those discussions are unfolding, and then some of the considerations for our staff. I wish I could be precise or guarantee the timing. Unfortunately, I can't. But I just want to say again that you do have our commitment that we're working through this, and that we are trying very hard to provide a response to you and the Source Protection Authority as soon as we can.
Thanks very much, Olga. That was really helpful. Any other
Madam
questions?
Chair?
Yes, Bill?
Madam Chair?
Yes,
I'm
Bill?
just saying I have to leave now, so I hope that we maintain quorum.
I think we're going to be fine, Bill.
We will lose quorum.
Okay.
We're at 18 right now. If
Oh,
Bill,
will we?
yeah, if Bill Unger leaves.
So I will designate my proxy to Eric.
Okay.
And
Thanks,
then that
Eric.
way you can maintain quorum.
Yes.
That's great. Thanks very much, Bill.
Okay.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Bill.
that.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Are there any other questions for Martin on the background? Seeing none. Can I have a mover and seconder for the motion, please?
Bill Strauss.
And Ralph Kruger? Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Thanks very much. We've done the progress reports. In a way, we've covered the business arising item through the aggregate report. Is there anything further you want to discuss on the business arising item? Seeing none. Then under other business, Martin is going to give us a little bit of a summary on the announcements yesterday with the changes relating to the water resource program and the water bottling moratorium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's going to be fairly brief because obviously I haven't had much time to go into the details, but it certainly is worth noting. Today, April 1, was the date the water bottling moratorium expired. And in time for that, the province made a number of decisions that have been posted on the environmental registry yesterday. Certainly, there's one change with regards to the Ontario Water Resources Act. They've included new sections in the regulation with regards to municipal support for water bottling. You may recall there was a proposal which is now being enacted for water bottling companies to gain support from the host municipality before they can advance with getting a permit for that water taking. There's also been changes to the water taking and transfer regulation. That's 38704 specifically. You may recall there have been proposals to include priority of water use into the framework. Also, with regards to how permits, I guess, are being managed in areas with water stress. Specifically, so those have been now included in the regulation. Basically, the director that has to provide notice if a area is stressed. They're now then compelled to continue to develop and can consult on a strategy on how those takings would be addressed. and to prepare, consult, and finalize a strategy. Those are the three things I think from my first preliminary glance is what is now in regulation in terms of what needs to be done should that notice go out in terms of a stressed area. Previous high water use designation and those maps, all those things have been revoked. That may be something that is fairly relevant for the Long Point region, Norfolk County, with regard to the sand plains that were in one of those high use designation areas. So those are not in effect anymore. There've also been items or there's language in the regulation with regards to making some of the data that is being collected and monitored to make that available to the public. So there's going to be a concerted effort to do that. There's also been new implementation guidelines. Again, they were proposed under the environmental registry. They've now been finalized. They've been out both on those stressed areas and how their consultation and how the work would happen and how the priority of water use would be implemented. So there's two documents on those guidelines that are now finalized through those notices. And then I did see there was also an easier water taking regulation change, but I haven't actually had time to look into the details there. But I believe there's some changes there as well into the sector registry in terms of water taking. So essentially a fairly broad-reaching changes based on the consultation that the province has done over the last few months. From our perspective, I think we have to go back to kind of look at those final decisions, those notices, and see into the broader framework on how water is managed in some of those areas and how things are done, the changes that have been implemented now, and yeah, I think what I can commit to do that analysis together with staff of the GRCA as well, and then we'll see what comes out of the other end, and I can certainly provide an update at the next meeting.
Thanks very much, Martin. Any questions for Martin or comments?
Yes, Madam Chair, I had a comment.
Okay.
One of the specific questions that was unclear when the draft guidance document for how the director might implement approaches to stressed water taking areas was the question of how it related to the water budget work being completed under the Clean Water Act. So that was obviously very important to those municipalities that had done water budget work and had identified or hadn't identified, for that matter, whether they were in a significantly stressed area or high water use area. The final regulation I did note, I searched specifically for that because I was curious, did clarify that, and they said that the water budget analysis by and of itself would not be sufficient to indicate that this was a stressed area under the provincial water budget, water management, water quantity management framework. So I just wanted to provide that clarification.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks,
I missed
Eric.
that one.
Any other questions or comments on this? I'm sure we'll be hearing more about it as it moves forward and becomes what gets implemented and what we're working with. Olga, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, Madam Chair, thank you.
No, you're welcome. We don't have a closed meeting. Please note there's a change date for the next Source Protection Committee meeting. And that's really come out of, it's a week earlier than what had initially been scheduled. The reason for that is so that if we can bring the Center Wellington policies back to the Source Protection Committee, we can get it to the Source Protection Authority for submission to the province by the end of June. So please note that difference. And that was one of the implications of not being able to bring the report to this meeting and dealing with the comments that were received. But I think it's really important that we kind of pause and adjust our process, because normally you'd be able to have informal discussions and comments and meet with people over any concerns or issues, but that's not been the case during COVID times. And so we just needed to take more time to do that, which I think is the right thing to have done. So just note that change, please. And hopefully that doesn't affect people's ability to participate and attend the meeting. So we've got to the end of a very long agenda. And thank you very much for your participation. And can I have a motion to adjourn? Andrew? And a seconder? Eric, thank you. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Have a good Easter weekend celebration, however you're able to do that. And we'll see you in June.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Bye-bye. Thank you.